Ladies and gentlemen, the 2025 Mexico City Grand Prix is upon us, and Max Verstappen is going to win that race. Oscar Piastri will finish third or lower. The gap will be 10 points or more, depending on how good the Ferraris will perform and how good the Mercedes will perform, and whether if Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris tangle among each other and take each other out, give each other punctures or damage, due to which they have to take an extra unscheduled pit stop. So it all depends on that. But the minimum gap that Verstappen will pull out and close up to Oscar Piastri will be by 10 points. Here's why. We will go through this step by step. So the first thing is, Mexico City is a Red Bull track. They have been strong here before. Max has won here many times before. And based on how this season has been panning out, particularly the last few races, particularly Max Verstappen performance in securing pole positions, he is going to get pole position. And from there, it's going to be an easy route to turn one, and he will have the Monza set up. That's how he is going to get the pole position, and then that's how exactly he is going to defend against the papaya cars in the start-finish straight, because he will just have very low downforce, very high top speed, and also the DRS advantage is very less with the papaya cars. It's going to be orange celebration after the end of the Grand Prix, because Verstappen will win by probably like 12 seconds or something. Now, let's talk about the papaya drivers. Lando Norris will be ahead of Oscar Piastri. He will be the faster McLaren, because what happened is, based on what I have been seeing, since the 2025 Azerbaijan Grand Prix, Piastri is a little bit spooked. He's a little bit afraid. He's a little bit stressed. He is tight. That's why he's making all of these fucked up mistakes. Now in Azerbaijan, the mistakes was very apparent. The next race in Singapore, he was not as aggressive in defending his position from Lando Norris. It was subtle, but it was visible. And also in the remainder of the race, Norris was much faster compared to Piastri. That was a very interesting and important observation. Then after Singapore, these motherfuckers went to the United States Grand Prix, and that's also, you can see, Oscar Piastri was a step behind Lando. It's not like the McLaren were particularly slow than the Red Bull. Max Verstappen qualified well. Charles Leclerc held Norris behind for pretty much the entirety of the race. That's why Norris wasn't able to mount a challenge to Verstappen. Not that he would have passed, but just saying. And Oscar Piastri he was not even putting any kind of pressure on Hamilton. He was closing up on Hamilton, I think, in the last lap, where Hamilton had some front left issue. I think it was a slow puncture or something. But Oscar Piastri's pace in United States Grand Prix was nowhere, because through the weekend, he didn't manage to extract more or fine-tune the car better to go faster. And the same trend is going to follow in the Mexico City Grand Prix. This is where the experience factor is going to matter so much. Norris has more experience in Formula One. That's why in these, closing stages of the season, under pressure, he's been here before, and he's again going to inch ahead of Oscar Piastri. Now, Oscar Piastri, like I mentioned, like I explained, since he was spooked since Azerbaijan, he has not been able to perform at the level that he was performing in the initial stages of the season, because in the initial stages, there is not a lot of stress. Championship is far away. It's a long season, blah, blah, blah. So Oscar Piastri is going to be the slower McLaren. So just by this analysis, Verstappen P1, Norris P2, Oscar Piastri P3, 10 points will be the difference between Verstappen and Piastri. And the gap, which is now 40 points, will reduce to 30 points. It could be even reduced further, depending on how shit Oscar Piastri is. Because in United States Grand Prix, Piastri was 2.5 tenths behind Norris, and that allowed 3 cars in between. Because the field is so tightly packed up, right? In qualifying, 2.5 tenths means 3 positions on the grid. It looks like a very huge impact, and it is a huge impact. Now, we need to talk about the potential performance of Ferrari and Mercedes. Not because obviously I'm interested in their battle for P2 in the constructors. Red Bull, Mercedes and Ferrari, they're battling among each other silently for P2 in the constructors, not a lot of people are paying attention because of Max Verstappen's resurgence, and he's catching the McLarens with great rate. So that battle is happening, but you have to understand that the unpredictability in the performance of the Ferraris and the Mercedes. So let's talk about Ferrari first, then we'll talk about Mercedes, and then we will conclude by analyzing where Piastri may stack up, because he is going to be the slower McLaren. So let's talk about Ferrari first. The problem with Ferrari is that their engineers are stupid and retarded, and so is their pit crew and the pit wall and all the people managing the cars. I will give you the example of Singapore, because in some sense, Singapore circuit is similar-esque to Mexico City. It's related to cooling, right? So in Mexico City, the air is thin. It can be difficult to warm up the tires and hold the temperature in tires. So you need to channel the energy from the brakes into the tires. The same thing happened with Ferrari in Singapore. Ferrari struggled to, take the tires and operate them in the right temperature. So what they do is they channel the energy from the brakes into the tires. Now, unfortunately, this fucks their brake cooling. Their brake cooling gets shot, and that's why Charles was doing LICO, lift and coast, so much in Singapore. And Lewis Hamilton's brake blew up when he was pushing the car too hard, 3 laps to go, and Fernando Alonso had that insane rant of, I cannot fucking believe it, X10. So that is the problem with Ferrari, because in Mexico also, they're gonna have the similar problems of warming up the tires, keeping them in the right temperature, etc., because the track is on an elevated land and the temperature will be low. So they will be channeling the brake energy into the tires, which will fuck their brake cooling. And as a result of that, either they will have to do a lot of LICO, and if they don't do LICO, then their brakes are gonna be shot. Now, alternatively, maybe they could manage the temperature of tires naturally, perhaps. There is obviously a possibility. It's Ferrari, we don't know, and neither do they. So that's the thing, right? Their issue in getting temperature into the tires in the tricky circuits, especially in Mexico, where the air is thin and cooling the brakes is a challenge, and the track is on elevated land, so obviously getting temperature into the tire will be challenging. And the air density is also 25% lower, so it just adds to the cooling problem in the braking zone, not in the braking zone, but in the braking components of the car. And then they have to manage the temperature of the tire. So that's something that they have to figure it out. On text, if you look at theoretically, if you want to go based on how they have been performing over the past few years, it looks like Ferrari will be competitive. Now, in that scenario, if Ferrari managed to execute the weekend perfectly like they did in United States Grand Prix, they will take points away from Oscar Piastri. That simply is what's going to happen. Because again, as I mentioned, Lando Norris will be the leading McLaren because of the experience. He knows how to extract the maximum performance out of the car. He knows how to deal with the situation. This is probably the first and only time Oscar Piastri, Oscar is thinking in his head, right? This is maybe the only chance that I have at winning the world title. I had at one point 104 points of lead. Now it's at 40. If I lose this one, then, I'll be the biggest chump. I was the favorite of winning the world championship one season. And now, I'm not, now everybody is it depends on how many points Oscar Piastri loses every Grand Prix. So all of that stress is affecting Piastri's performance. He's incapable of finding the right setup window. It happened in United States Grand Prix in COTA in Austin last weekend. It happened. He wasn't able to, improve his pace as consistently as Norris, and he couldn't find the sweet spot in the car as quickly and consistently as Norris. So the same problem is going to happen again in the Mexico City Grand Prix. If Ferrari managed to execute their weekend perfectly, don't have the LICO problems, don't have the brake cooling issues, can manage to put the right temperature into the tires, then both of the Ferraris will keep Oscar Piastri behind. That leaves us with another leading team of Mercedes AMG Petronas Formula One team. Osama bin Russell is hopeful that they will be competitive here. Toto Wolff, before this weekend has begun, has given a statement that they are firing on all cylinders and they will be coming hard, not coming hard, but like arriving the track with a more battle-ready mindset in order to extract the best results and get the best results for the team. I don't think they will be as quick. Obviously they're not going to be as quick as Verstappen and the two McLarens, but obviously they can be. I mean, they will be slightly quicker than what we have seen in Kota, relatively speaking. But I genuinely don't see them beating the Ferraris unless something crazy happened with the Ferraris, as I was explaining. If Ferrari suffer to the LICO issues and all this shit, then obviously both of them, like not both of them, because Kimi Antonelli is a little bit sketchy sometimes, but both of the Mercedes will have the potential to pip the Ferraris. In that scenario, it depends on Oscar Piastri how well he manages to stay in the thick of it. And that's the problem. If Oscar Piastri doesn't qualify well, if he qualifies behind the Ferraris, because let's assume that Ferrari performs well, or let's assume that Mercedes perform well, if Piastri manages to do that in the midfield and he has a Ferrari or a Mercedes ahead of him, then he is cooked. Because the Ferrari, the Mercedes are fighting with each other for P2 in the constructors. It's the midfield. Everybody's going to be desperate. Field is going to be bunched up. You have to play it safe. You cannot take risks in order to make overtakes. Turn 1, 2, and 3 in Mexico City. A lot of change of directions. You're going to get fucked up if you take risks. So if that is the case, if Oscar Piastri is too further behind Lando Norris throughout this weekend, then he will lose much more than 10 points. It's going to happen. He will lose more than 10 points to Max Verstappen. If the gap between Piastri and Norris is like neck and neck within a tenth, okay, then 10 points is what he will lose. Unfortunately, that's still too much. 5 races to go. If Piastri loses 10 points per Grand Prix to Max Verstappen, then Verstappen will win by 10 points come Abu Dhabi. And that's also not factoring in the sprint race. So if we factor in the sprint race and Verstappen wins the sprints, then he will be leading the World Championship by a couple of points by the time we reach Abu Dhabi. Anyway, and this is again assuming Oscar Piastri is consistently the slower McLaren. And this is the whole funny thing about the Oscar Piastri versus Max Verstappen title fight situation in 2025 is that when Piastri was leading the championship by 104 points after the Dutch Grand Prix, it was all about how many points he loses if he doesn't score a victory. He didn't need to win any more races after that. It's just that don't lose too many points. That was the mission. And he is fucking it up phenomenally because in the United States Grand Prix, people always talk about the Azerbaijan Grand Prix where he lost 25 points to Verstappen. Okay, I get that. But what about the United States Grand Prix? He lost 23 points in that weekend to Verstappen. And yes, the crash in the sprint race was Piastri's fault 100%. I was watching Jolyon Palmer's analysis of the fucking situation. And he said that, it's just the driver instinct to go to the switchback and blah, blah, blah. Bro, it was lap 1. The entire field is bunched up. There are way too many cars around you. You don't just do this, the switch. I mean, I understand the switchback. I think Charles Leclerc did the switchback on Lando Norris when Lando and Charles were fighting. Norris, dived down the inside, sent it down the inside in turn 1, and then Charles Leclerc switched back to retake the position. That's fine. I understand because it's not the start of the race. The entire field is not bunched up. But when you are starting at the race, you don't suddenly make moves because you're going to take yourself out and you're going to take other people out. The luckiest thing that happened to Oscar Piastri in that crash that he instigated was that he also took out Lando Norris. Otherwise, Norris would have been 7 more points closer to Oscar Piastri. Furthermore, another thing, again, it's all the result of Piastri putting the stress on him. And the pressure of battling against Verstappen is now getting to him. Since Azerbaijan, I have been observing Piastri is losing his cool. He can speak slowly as much as possible, in front of media. That's his demeanor. That's his style. That's his tone, his tonality. That's how he talks. Piastri talks slowly, calmly, and that's how is the modulation of his voice. But that doesn't mean he is not shitting bricks. He is shitting bricks. He is losing sleep. All of those challenges are happening with him. That's why he's making mistakes. That's why he's doing the switchback maneuvers in lap one when the entire field is bunched up. That's why he's incapable of giving the right feedback to the engineers to find the right setup window throughout the quota weekend. And he was 2.5 tenths behind Lando Norris consistently in every session, which cost him a lot of positions, like in qualifying, which obviously translated into the race because, again, in United States Grand Prix, Piastri was nowhere in terms of race pace. The same thing is going to happen in Mexico. All Piastri needs to do right now is to manage the gap to Max, which I genuinely don't think is going to happen. I think Verstappen is the favorite to win the 2025 championship. He's going to make it 5 in a row, and Piastri is going to throw it away. He is going to get jittery. He is going to get, too greedy and too impatient, and he will try to make moves stick that are not there. And in Mexico City, lap one crashes can happen. Like, that's all I'm gonna say. So that's the official prediction. Max Verstappen wins. Oscar Piastri P3 or lower. The championship is sealed. For me, it's sealed. Verstappen is gonna win. The recent performance and resurgence of Red Bull shows it. They have been very competitive in Singapore, which means they're gonna be competitive. Verstappen is going to be fighting for pole position and win for the remaining races of the season, including Mexico City Grand Prix, which means he will win all of the races for the remainder of the season, including Mexico City Grand Prix. Thank you for watching. Like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.